Well, aloha, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kelly Wells. I'm your host of PWTorch NXT. We're talking NXT for February 2025. And I had my YouTube thing open, so I heard myself about 5 seconds after that. And man, that was distracting. Business first. Minutes before we went on today. Sorry, this took a bit to start, but I got some really bad news, and I don't know that I will make it all the way through. I don't know that I will make it much of the way through, but we're going to give this a shot. And if I disappear, that happened. And I would say more, but the person involved is very, very private, and I want to be private, even though none of you know the person involved. So just getting that out of the way, because I don't know that I'll be able to do this. Let us talk about Vengeance Day, because
we haven't done that.
We haven't done that. Because you weren't able to watch it at all that night. I watched it later. No, I watched it the next day, and I ended up doing the recap the next day. But yeah, I quite liked it. I didn't actually write down the matches, so maybe should have done that, because I do this the old-fashioned way when I'm podcasting. But yeah, I mean, big picture thoughts. We've got Eddie Thorpe and Ethan Page both winning non-title matches, kind of de facto number one contenders matches. Both matches that I would think were winnable by the other guy in a vacuum, but you need heel challengers for Obafemi, because they tried to make heel Obafemi happen, and the man's just too cool for it. And it wouldn't take. So they got a couple of heels lined up to face him, potentially. Now it looks like Page has different things going on, so I'm guessing that man will be Eddie Thorpe, but it also looks like Eddie Thorpe's going to have a little bit more Trick Williams in his future, because Trick got his customary 30 seconds of mic time this week. Not sure why we're seeing so little Trick. It feels very odd. But yeah, we got Eddie Thorpe winning his biggest match, Page winning a match that I thought he'd win. I was more coin flip on the strap match, but I think the coin would have come up this side. I guess either way. But yeah, the meat of this show was really in the championship matches. Julia defending in the way that we thought that she would, and a tag match that was just beautifully mean and brutal. Great big versus small. Maybe my favorite match of the night, that one, and along with the women's 4-way. And what am I missing? 3-way. Yes. What triple threat happened that I should? Oh yeah,
It was Obafemi and A-Town Down.
Yep. Yeah, here I'm trying to think of NXT guys, and two of them weren't. So yes, Obafemi still undefeated in triple threats. So not going to do long form on that. If it comes up a little more, I will talk about it more. But those are my quick and dirty thoughts on the show. Nate, anything to add on that before we go to whatever?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I certainly enjoyed the show. The main event, Obafemi versus A-Town Down Under, it pretty much went the way I expected it to go. It was an entertaining match. They did a good job with it, but I mean, I even said how I thought it was going to go last week, and it more or less went that way. So, is what it is there. Cool to see A-Town Down Under back in NXT, I guess, but yeah, there we go. The Ethan Page versus Javon Evans, that was one that I was a little on the fence, didn't know how it was going to go, but I'm curious to see how this progresses with Javon Evans not getting a win, getting the job beat down and broken even more, and the whole story of him potentially not being able to wrestle again because of it, or if he got his job broken or injured again in the match. That could go kind of far. I'm curious to see what this goes. Obviously, Ethan Page kind of taking that heat, moving it on to Ricky Saints, but we'll get there. Ricky Saints, that's going to take some getting used to. What else do we have? Trick Williams, Eddie Thorpe, the strap match was fun. Eddie needed the win. Trick couldn't get away without one, so I think that went the way it should have gone. Really glad to see Fraxium continue their reign, especially with them calling out the Hardys tonight. But again, we'll talk to that when we get there. Stephanie Vaquer was the one where I don't want to say I didn't expect it, because I talked about it, potentially being an option and happening. But at the same time, I don't know. I didn't think Fallon Henley was going to lose. It just didn't feel like the right time, at least in my head, for it. But regardless, still happy to see her as the new North American.
I forgot to mention that one, and that was a really, really great opener. Fallon's doing great work, but that faction does not win very often.
No.
And
no, like in hindsight, like I think Stephanie was the right way to go. As much as I like Fallon Henley, like you said, she's the standout in that faction. The other two, I hate to say drag her down. I don't mean that negatively, but I don't think she needs them. I guess that might be a better way of saying it. I think they and the two of them being Nyx and Stacey Jane, as Vic called her a couple times tonight during her match.
Did he really? Oh no.
He did. I even went back. I rewound to make sure that I heard it, and he did. It was at least twice in her match in that triple threat tonight.
That's
such
a
triple threat.
Jim Ross thing to do.
I mean, Stacey,
not to be mean, but Jim Ross gets names wrong all the time.
And that's a bar not that far from where I live, right down on the beach. So Stacey Jane's, or at least it used to be. I don't know if it's still there. COVID might have shut it down. I don't know. I'm not a bar guy. But yeah, overall, I thought Vengeance Day was a great pay-per-view. And there's probably a hell of a lot more to talk about, but we didn't. And Jobin just chimed in on Discord and said Stacey Jane's is not a bar anymore where I live. So but you guys don't care. So we'll move on.
Stacey Jane, we hardly knew ye. Goodfellow 1422 in the chat says Yoshiki Inamura, first time seeing him. He was fun. Not the first time seeing him for me, but I haven't seen him a lot of times. I watch tons and tons of Japanese wrestling, but it is all in New Japan. And that's not where he was. He was in Pro Wrestling Noah. And New Japan does a lot of working with Pro Wrestling Noah. But I only see them when they do things with the two companies going together. And even then, I only see what they do on the New Japan Pro Wrestling side of things. But Inamura is all the things that I love about strong style. And he's not trying to adapt to the WWE style. He's trying to be a strong style wrestler in the WWE system. And I love him for it. Yeah, this is...
he stood out. He definitely stood out in that tag match to me.
Mm-hmm.
Big time.
Bailey was on the show, and CJ LaChapelle has made himself very known as a Bailey fan and says, Bailey is the first women's wrestler for me to care about the women just as much, and even sometimes even more than the men's matches. Who was the first woman for you to care that much? That much? I'm going to say first one was potentially Molly Holly. I adore Molly Holly. I liked women's wrestling, but there was a time when they were trying to make women's wrestling happen, but they also didn't have a lot of women who had been training to be wrestlers all their lives, because you couldn't grow up and be a successful women's wrestler. So there just weren't that many. So we had a generation of women who were very eager, but they weren't at that level yet. But they kicked the door open. They cracked the door open. Next generation kicked the door open. I wanted to dislike Trish because she was just so hot and such a Vince thirst trap. And I was like, she's just gonna not be good. And then she started wrestling, and I was like, oh God. She's pretty good. She's so much better than she should be. And then I just love Mickey James came along, and I was just crazy about
Oh
her.
God, yeah,
Jazz, I
show's
was
so good.
crazy about her. Jacqueline, Jacqueline might have been the first one that made me really sit up and take notice. But Molly Holly was just such almost a guilty pleasure at first because her character was so silly. But hey, Minneapolis representing. That's Nora Greenwald, aka Molly Holly, who is still a trainer and doing work with WWE because there have been shots of her on the new show LFG. So yeah,
It's true.
those. And now I love women's wrestling like exactly as much as I love men's wrestling. I just love. I wouldn't have just one. It's two. The only thing that's tough for me when I watch New Japan is there isn't any women's wrestling unless it's a pay-per-view because they got the two brother sister promotions working together. So that's the one thing I miss when I'm watching that. But I do definitely get my fill of it with American wrestling, and I do occasionally watch Stardom, but there's only so much time in a week, so I haven't been watching a lot of it. Were you going to say something? Sorry.
I was gonna chime in. No, for me, like, I kind of classify it as like different eras because, back then I certainly had a lot of, and when I say back then, I'm talking like Attitude Era. When I first started watching, I was like 8, 9 years old, whatever. And a lot of the women that you mentioned, like I liked, but I mean, I don't know, they didn't treat women's wrestling like they treated men's wrestling, so it didn't really like Trish, Lita, they were definitely two of my favorites. Tori was also another one that I really liked. Tori Wilson, not the other Tori that dated X Pac for
She
a
was just
brief
there.
minute. Yeah,
Yeah.
she was there
I
for the
should have
look.
mentioned Victoria also.
Oh yeah, Victoria was really good. But coming up, into kind of the new more modern era, coming into, the four horsewomen, they were really the four women that made me care about women's wrestling as much as, and maybe Paige. I'm going to lump Paige in there too. So it's really the five of them. They really started to redefine what women's wrestling was around the same time. Paige, I think, obviously kind of started it. I wouldn't say she started it. That's not what I meant. But she kind of was in that position first, and then followed pretty closely by the four horsewomen there. So yeah, that was it for me.
Yeah, I would mention people like Paige, but by then I was so bought in on women's wrestling, I didn't need the buy-in, but it's great. The stuff that they brought to
The caveat being is I had just come back to wrestling after like not watching for years. So like for me, it was still, Divas era in my head from, I kept up with things over, every once in a while, but as far as I knew, it was still bra and panties matches and things like that.
Yeah,
So,
dark days.
yes, the dark days of the women's division.
And my friends would be like, "How is this not what you want out of wrestling?" And I'm like, "Dude, this is the single easiest thing to find on the internet. Most of the internet is this, except harder core. If I want that, I know where to go." There's still going to be hot women. They just don't. Yeah, they deserve better than mud wrestling and stuff like that. Whatever. Mud wrestling should be reserved for guys like Henry Godwinn and Triple H. I think we can all agree on that. I don't know if you're old enough to have seen that match, but I have seen that match.
I know about
Triple
it,
H
but I haven't actually.
Still jokes about it.
Never seen it. Never seen it. Heard about it. Never seen it.
CJ LaChapelle has one more question, more big picture before we get to other business. Should WWE do more best of 7 series? Who would be the best to do a best of 7 series right now in WWE? I think that they've got a lot of people who could do a best of 7.
Oof, I gotta think.
I mean, I was gonna say, oh my god, I literally just came up with 2, and they just did a series. they just did a best of 5 with Carmelo Hayes and Andrade. And literally those were the 2 guys I was going to name. And maybe it was just subconscious on my part that I picked the guys who just did one. But they do seem the kind of the guys that, they're lower down on the card at the moment. But simply ring work can get these guys over. If I want to try to jam this into an NXT sort of context, I think you could. I had one and I lost them. I mean, the women, there's no shortage. You could do Kalani Jordan and Jada Parker as a best of 7 because they're feuding.
That could work.
They're going to want to get at each other probably more than once. You could do this as a best of 7 and they're both pretty good at Jada, especially at trash talk. So, but Kalani's pretty good too. She's gotten so much better. And I think that could be pretty interesting. So that's one you could do on NXT. And if I had to pick anyone from NXT, I think that would probably be it. And if it was on the main roster, oh gosh, there's so much talent there. And you could do, well, if Bronson Reed wasn't hurt, you could have done that with him and Braun Strowman. I know they had multiple matches, but you could have done that with those two. And it's not, the work rate thing. They're going to be short bursts. These matches are going to be 6-7 minutes long, and that's fine. And I just don't, if anyone's coming to your mind, go ahead and cut me off.
So I'm terrible with put this together real quick. So I'm struggling to come up with something, but I guess I wouldn't say I'm struggling with something because I did come up with something. I don't know if it's the greatest or the best thing, but it kind of ties into one of the things we did see tonight in NXT, which we haven't actually even gotten into the show tonight, believe it or not. But one of the things we saw was Andre Chase return to NXT TV. Right now currently in a feud with Sean Spears and his goons and whatnot. So I could say, I don't know, I can't think of the 2 students' names in Chase University.
I wrote them down because I always forget both of them.
Thankfully, Cale
and
Dixon
Uriah
and
Connors.
Uriah Connors. You did write them down in the report. I just noticed. So I don't know, tonight they talked, they talked on behalf of Andre Chase, got him this match tonight. Maybe they do something like that, get him in a best of 5. I don't know if I want to say a best of 7 of Sean Spears and Andre Chase, but best of 5 or something like that. That's at least, if you're going to slot something like that in, that's the best place that I could think of right now for it. But overall, big picture, I do like the best of 5, 7, something like that. I don't want to see them go to that well super, super, super often. But if you have 2 guys or women that could certainly go out and do that, 100% sure. If it makes sense, absolutely. I think whatever stipulation makes sense for the story, you use it. That's why I hated Hell in a Cell and I hated TLC and I hated, not as match types, but as branded pay-per-views because, it's that time of the year again. Let's just dust off the cell. The stipulation should add to the match. It should just be there because it's a branded pay-per-view, which thankfully they seem to be moving away from, which is great. Anyway, my mini rant over.
Goodfella says, give me Gable versus Seth Rollins. Sure.
I'd watch that.
But to get to match 7, you got to put Gable over Rollins 3 times. And do they have the nuts to do that? I'm going to say no. Gable's
I don't
great.
care. I just want to watch that.
But yeah. Let's let me do one more thing from CJ. And then maybe we'll talk about NXT because I still don't know how much longer I'm going to last. Should WWE go back to brand specific PLEs? I was so in favor of them for a while.
No,
but everything is so hot right now. Everything is so hot that I feel like it should be a big deal to be able to even get on a pay-per-view. And the talent pool is deep enough for it to work, I guess, but you have to put people on pay-per-views that maybe are not ready. I don't want to say not ready for prime time. They're on prime time every night. But I just think you're striking while the iron's hot, and the iron's hotter than it's been in like a couple of decades. And I don't think it's the time to be thinning out your biggest shows, even though there are 12 over the course of the year. If you want to do big brand specific shows, then maybe confine them to the shows themselves. But right now, I have no complaints with the pay-per-views. I have no complaints with what they're doing on Saturday night's main event. I used to be a pro brand split pay-per-view guy. I'm still a pro brand split roster guy just because the roster's got so much talent on it. And there's something different to watch a couple times a week. But I'm no longer that way on pay-per-views, Nate.
Yeah, I do. I don't mind the mixed pay-per-views, with both Raw and SmackDown, because like I felt like the 2 months or trying to build between 2 months between pay-per-views for each brand was just difficult. I kind of like the flow that they have there. But as far as brand specific goes, I I I never liked the brand specific pay-per-views. For all the reasons I just kind of said. Like, there's no reason to just dust off the Hell in a Cell because it's October, whenever it normally was. I know they moved around a few times, but regardless, as long as if a stipulation or if a match calls for a stipulation like a Hell in a Cell or a tables, ladders, and chairs match or something, that's when you dust it off. And if you want to have a branded pay-per-view, maybe you have your main event feud, your Cody versus Roman or whatever it is, whatever you're building to, that big match. They have their William Regal shouting War Games moment, their big moment that leads up to that unveiling of a stipulation, and then you build the entire show around it, and it's called Hell in a Cell, or it's called TLC, or whatever that stipulation is. Fatal Four Way is one of the ones they used for NXT back in the day. That's the way that I really would like to see like branded pay-per-views in terms of a stipulation. Otherwise, like, whatever the name of the pay-per-view it is what it is. And we get good matches with random stipulations, and the stories mean something. So they mean more, I think. Yeah.
Y'all are asking us everything about the world of pro wrestling, and that's very flattering. But let's move on. Let's go to NXT.
Yeah. It's nice to talk about something that's not NXT every once in a while.
I know, it's really easy to go down that rabbit hole
It
once
is.
somebody asks us to. No fewer than 15 women were booked to wrestle on this show. So let us start talk about them. That sentence, let's just take it out back and shoot it.
It was English, kinda.
Yeah,
Kinda.
Not bad for a guy who's English second language, right? Julia versus Stephanie Vicaire versus no, not versus Julia and Stephanie Vicaire and Jordan Grace versus Fatal Influence. This one went 13:01. This was your main event. It was the longest match of the night by about a minute and a half. And man, boy, was it good. Everybody got their shine. Fatal Influence has some really, really nice looking double and triple team moments. A lot of nice spots by them. Of course, they have to lose this because A, losing is what they do. And B, wacky teams of superstars almost always beat established teams, even if the announcers sell the idea that the team has the upper hand. They never do, because Jasmine Nix eats the pin. I guess it's a nice day for JC Jane, because usually she does.
Stacey Jane.
Stop. Don't make me accidentally start saying it.
That's the plan.
This was all about Jordan Grace. She got like a superstar entrance.
Oh, yeah.
She got superstar moments in the match. The heels fed her a lot during this match, which, I mean, that's going to be her career because she's a monster. But this was really a chance to put her over in a main event setting. And then, of course, the women won when, of course, Grace won the match for them, beat Jasmine Nix. They all held their hands up afterwards, but you know what? Her hands were down, but on either side of her, the outside arm of the woman, of the baby face on the side of her, was holding up a championship belt. And she gave them very quick glances. I thought she was really good at being subtle here. That was your main event, a Jordan Grace showcase. Then we got the faction, and I'm just going to call it the faction because they don't have a name. The guys in the bandanas, the Grand Theft Auto guys. Let's call
Oh,
them that.
no. Retribution 2.0.
Oh gosh.
I'm
I don't
sorry. That was
know.
awful. Please don't. Let's not do that. I don't mean to just,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
I,
let's
I'm.
forget it. Let's forget I even
I
said
thought
that.
it was interesting that they just teased the guys again without having a lot of them, and I thought, having them in a match right now would have been way too soon. Um,
Oh yeah.
and Mr. Stone either got written out of NXT or he got a storyline to be part of because he was the one at the wrong end of the beatdown. If I had to guess, this felt like them writing him out, but I don't know. I know that he's valuable in backstage roles, in mentorship roles and things like that. So maybe they're just writing him off TV, but not out of the company. And maybe he's going to get somebody to try to face them, which is odd because he's not a babyface exactly, but he's not exactly anything. So who knows?
Or maybe he's faking and he's actually the mastermind behind this whole faction.
That I wouldn't hate, but although he's been used so much for comedy that I'm not sure it's the way. You could bring Von Wagner back. Nate, I'm going to forget I said that. Main event.
Please do. I forgot about him until you said that.
He's stuck in my head a couple of days for some
You know,
reason, and he wouldn't leave.
I gotta say he was getting there before he got released. He was getting there.
Yeah.
No, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it kind of. I mean, on the
I
mic, he
mean,
still sounded like,
compared to where he was like a year before that. But
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, Mr.
yeah.
Stone's been given some real tough assignments. Hey, get this guy over. And he's like, yeah, are you sure? I'm good. I don't know if I'm a miracle worker. Okay. Main event and the faction attacks Mr.
Yeah.
Stone.
So I'll talk about the faction attacking and stuff first. So, like honestly, I like the idea. I mean, it's a tried and true trope in wrestling. There's some scary faction, that's coming in to disrupt the balance of what's going on within the company. The NWO or D-Generation X, or I guess they weren't. I guess DX wasn't quite like that, but I guess you know what I mean. Retribution was another one. It was an interesting angle, but interesting idea. The Nexus, and so it can certainly work, and in some of those cases it can certainly flop. But it's interesting and it's compelling right now. So I know Dion Lennox was one of the names that they had mentioned on TV. There are a couple other names that I don't remember off the top of my head, and I don't have up on my other monitor here. Um, but I think it's a great way to get some newer new talent over, whether they've been on TV or not. It's in Dion Lennox's case anyway. Um, the main event match, absolutely, Kelly was 100% right here. This was just a way, well, not just a way, but this is a way to get Jordan Grace over to show her off to the NXT crowd once again. This time, I guess really for the first time in NXT anyway, as a full true WWE wrestler. Obviously, we saw her under WWE contract in the Rumble, but it's the first time on NXT TV as a actual NXT wrestler. Um, awesome to see her in the company. I'm super pumped to see what she does and what she brings to this already amazingly stacked women's division. This is starting to feel like like 2019, 2020 all over again. well, in the women's wrestling sense, not in the COVID sense. Um, then, but I think everybody, at least Julia, Stephanie, everybody on this team, they looked great. Obviously, like you said, Fatal Influence, they're there to kind of take the pen and the loss, because that's what they do. Um, uh, Fallon Henley, I think, yeah, obviously, as we talked, she's the standout of that group. Um, I'd kind of like to see her maybe move away from them in the near future, but that is what it is. Um, One thing I did notice at the very end of this segment, at the end of the match, when the three women were standing there, Stephanie and Julia with their titles held high. Um, Julia, and I don't know, this is just me, but the way that I was reading her facial expressions was almost concern, like a slight concern. Like, it wasn't like oh my God, I'm going to lose my title tomorrow, but like this just slight concern, like, okay, you're here, but damn, you're gonna be a challenge. I didn't necessarily read that off of Stephanie, but that was something that I did read off of her. Um, so we'll go from there. But yeah, overall, love it, and very, very, very excited to see Jordan Grace and her future in the WWE.
And I would suggest that's the way to go, because Jordan's not going to go for the North American Championship.
Oh God,
Um,
no.
Stephanie wouldn't even, if not for the fact that Julia was around and she carries just a little bit more name value. I like Stephanie as much or more, which is crazy because like Japanese strong style is what I
Yeah.
eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But man, do I like Stephanie. I'm usually thinking about Stephanie McCare. That's how I can basically just describe my life right now. My wife is demanding answers, and I don't have
I,
easy answers for her.
I was just gonna say, I'm like, does she doesn't watch the show, right?
We were watching the Royal Rumble, and a couple of the guys that were with me, like some of my best friends in the world, were watching with me at my house, as is the norm for the Rumble. And they were talking about somebody in the ring. One of them thought that one of them was just going off about like Liv Morgan and how good looking she is. And I was like, I see it, but like she's not my type at all. And then the bell
She's mine.
dinged, and it was Stephanie McGare. And I was like, now if you could create my type in a lab, Stephanie McGare is it. And my wife's in the room, and she was like, yeah, he's not lying. So there you go. Let us go to the opening match, which I guess kind of led into the final match in a way. This is number one contendership for the NXT Women's North American Championship. Kalani Jordan versus Jada Parker versus Carmen Petrovich. This is exactly what I said they were setting up for when they announced this officially on Vengeance Day. I said this allows Carmen to go up and lose that match while they continue the issue with Jordan and Parker. It's exactly what I thought this match was for. Something Vic said that I could not believe was this was the first triple threat for all these women, which is shocking because NXT.
I mean, he said Stacey Jane. I mean,
that's true. NXT is so in love with triple threats. They run them all the time. And so I was a little shocked to learn that this was the first triple threat. Shocked to the point of, I would say, genuine disbelief. So I would like to see the judge's ruling on that one. But Carmen Petrovich wins this one. Shante the Adonis, of course, instrumental in this happening. I thought this was pretty funny. Parker doing her teardrop and her high stepping taunt, which I just think is one of the greatest taunts in the game right now. I love it, but it gave him time to roll Carmen into the ring and get the cheap win. Fatal Influence shows up, and this is our first split screen, just a beatdown of a babyface, in this case Carmen. Stephanie McCare makes the save, but there aren't enough people. Julia makes the save, there aren't enough people, and then Jordan Grace shows up, and then we've got superstar power in there, and that turned the tide. So 11:29, Carmen's your winner. Carmen had a couple of iffy moments in this one. Kalani and Jada did not have any iffy moments because iffy moments are not what these two are doing right now. They're both just so good right now. So yeah, Jordan and Parker, I continue to look very much forward to whatever they're going to do with that feud. And Carmen, she's all right. They're doing something with her. They're trying something with her. And I'm looking forward to that match with Stephanie to see just what she can do with somebody as talented and as much as road worn. I don't know what I say about somebody who's wrestled all over the place.
Who
As
is
Stephanie Becerra.
already a veteran, maybe.
Let's do it that way.
Yes.
Yeah. So your opener, another 3 women.
So at one point in there, you said superstar power, and for some reason, this image of Molly Shannon and her superstar get up, leveling up like a Super Saiyan popped into my head, and I just needed to share. Welcome to my brain. Anyway, that being said, I really like what they're doing right now, kind of experimenting with Carmen Petrovic. We've kind of talked about how over the what is it, a year and a half or so, maybe a little longer, she's been on TV. But I mean, she's gotten much better as time's gone on. And we've said in the past, like at least I remember talking about this at one point. She's got something. There's something there, and I think they're trying to experiment, like you said, Kelly, and see what might be there. And I think putting her in this spot with Stephanie, it's wise. I mean, right now, nobody believes she's going to win the NXT North American title. Stephanie just won it. So as a first challenger, why not? It's somebody that, everybody, I don't want to say she's not believable, because I think that she is to some degree, but at the same time, she's not really that believable to go ahead and beat Stephanie. But I think it is going to show what she's capable of, and what she can kind of do when put in a more high pressure situation, something like for a title. Kalani Jordan, Jada Parker in this match, they both looked great as always. Don't have much more to say, about. Actually, no, it's not true. I really want to see more of this mean streak out of Kalani. Said it before, saying it again, but there we go. And then obviously we had the setup for the main event, which we already talked about. So there we go.
And I'll piggyback and say the mean streak doesn't have to be heel for Kalani. It can just be badass.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way to go. I would, if it were me booking this, I would not turn Kalani. I think trying her out as a badass babyface is enough. And one day, if you have to, go ahead and turn her. But I think that this slightly edgier babyface version of her is where that act is at. Nate, we've talked too much about the main roster, so let me talk about it just a little bit more. Did you see
Sounds
Raw?
good. I did see
Roxanne Perez. Oh my God.
I know. Not only, I mean, we've been talking about her on, potentially getting called up to the main roster for a little while now. Looks like that's probably it. But going to Elimination Chamber, this is huge. I'm awesome. I'm pumped about it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep talking while I walk off screen to grab a Band-Aid, but I'm bleeding. I don't know how I injured myself doing a podcast, but I managed to do it.
This is why not everybody can wrestle, folks.
No, I tried that and I kind of got hurt. I didn't get hurt, but I was limping for a bit.
So yeah, Roxy is going to be in the Elimination Chamber match. Thank you, good fella, for accidentally bringing her back to my mind. I was going to bring her up early on, and did
Who's
not.
that? I'm in the kitchen.
What's that?
I can't see what Goodfella said because I'm in the kitchen.
Oh, he just said that I love Roxanne. Did take me a while to warm up to her, which I can understand because she was a babyface. You see Roxanne as a wrestling promoter and you're like, oh, she's a babyface, obviously. So you try it and then it falls flat and you think there's no way this girl has heel in her, and then you find out she's a born heel. She was born naughty. She was made to be that way, and now she's killing it because we found out what she can do. So
I
there
would
you go.
I could not agree with you more.
Yep. I adore her. Yeah, I let's see. CJ says I like Julia so far more than Roxanne. I don't like Roxanne's spoiled brat and disrespectful attitude. That's what I love about her. That's what she's good at. That's the role she's made to play, baby. She is, I don't know. I'm so psyched, and I'm so excited for how far she can go up the ladder. I hope they don't try to do too much too soon. I would not have thought that Roxy would be somebody that they'd push to the moon, but apparently she has the full backing of the brass, because getting her even just being in that match, which again, she won't win, I don't think. But I also didn't think that she would go station to station in the Rumble, and she almost did because she was number 3, and she was close to being there. CJ also adds, do you think her small size will hold her back on the main roster? I'm going to say maybe, because if she was a dude, yes, they don't do things that way, but she's not. So for some reason, the bookers just allow themselves to see the women as they are. They still build monsters and do things like that, but they seem to book based on reactions and things like that. And
Looking at the size of Julia and I mean Stephanie Vicker, I mean they're going to, I mean they're primed to be stars on the main roster already. They're not much bigger than Roxanne. I look at like, and I mean this might be a bad example, Caden Carter and Casey Catanzaro. When I was there at NXT, I talked about, had a front row seat. I was 5 feet away at one point from the two of them, and I don't want to say shocked at how tiny they were, but it was startling. It was it was surprising to see how small a lot of the women actually really were. You see them on TV, you don't really have the comparison. It's larger than life. It's WWE. But then you see it in real life. I don't think it's going to be a detriment to her.
not the
If
first
it
or
doesn't
last
have to be.
time that I'll bring this up, but I had an extended conversation with Shayna Baszler after a show, and Shayna was
Yes, we
being
did.
booked as unbeatable in NXT, and she's like 6 or 7 inches shorter than I am. I'm 5'11". I mean, I'm reasonably
Wow.
tall. I'm taller than the average dude, which is, I think the
Yeah, you got a
average
couple
American
inches on
male
me.
is like 5'8". But I'm 5'11", and she's like 5'5" or 6". I wasn't. She's so monstrous in so many ways that I was not ready to meet her and tower over her. But of course, because because she's a girl and she's shorter, and they're shorter in general. So it was very, it really made me respect production that much more, to make sure she's never seen as being smaller than life. So there you go.
Indeed, you do. I just was breaking the silence.
Yeah. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Let's do a thing. You know what? We're talking women. Let's just get the last women's match out of the way. Zarya and Sol Ruka versus Lash Legend and Jakara Jackson. That scene that they showed, that social media scene they showed with Zarya and Sol Ruka, is not something that I thought I would ever see. Zarya came in as a monster, and they did a scene where she was just having fun at a park with Sol Ruka, and failing at real person things. Just a weird thing. Yeah, Zarya and Sol Ruka win this one. Soul Snatcher on Jakara Jackson. Zarya does the heavy lifting at the end. Sol Ruca finishes the match 11:37. Um, and yeah, this was fun stuff. I just want to call out a couple of people just concerned about what's going on with me. Sean, who would used to drop in more often, but he dropping in today, said just wanted to stop in and say, hey, miss talking with both of you guys. Kelly, is everything okay? No, it's not. It's not me, but it's somebody who I see on a regular basis. Who
is going through some stuff.
Lost an unborn child who would have been their first. And this would have been family. So today's hard. And thank you for asking. I like that you guys care about this. I like that a lot. I'm very happy about that and very flattered about that. And you don't have to say anything more if you don't want to. And I'm not going to, because I don't think I'll be able, but I will continue talking about these women. Zarya and Sol Ruca over Jackson, 11:37, kind of an auspicious loss for the Meta Girls, because they seem to have one foot in the main roster, but Zarya and Sol Ruca, it just seems like these odd couple tag teams, they work. They just always work if the commitment is there to one of them being serious and one of them being carefree, which is what this team is. And
I
I
don't know
think they
why
can do things.
the tag team head cheese just came to my mind for a weird, odd pairing.
Head cheese, that's a good one. I was
Yeah,
actually thinking of Zoe Stark and Io Shirai, where
that
Io
was a good one too.
Shirai kept saying, "I don't like you, but I will be your partner." Things like
That was
that.
fantastic.
I love her so much, and I love the way she delivers those lines. Um, but yeah, so yeah, that completes the 15 women that were on this particular show. 6, 9. You know what? It's 13. I lied.
Gasp.
13, but what are you going to do? It's yes, gasp indeed. Saul Snatcher, still one of the best finishing moves in the game. Oh mama, it's super cool. And yeah, we've got tag team dominance, but no idea if this will get to a match. You know what? Bianca Belair and Naomi were mentioned just enough that I could see this being another chance for an NXT team to win that particular tag team championship.
That would be cool. I didn't really think about it, but I like to think about that. That'd be sweet. No, in terms of odd pairings, I like the odd pairing tag teams. I mean, one of my favorite tag teams, like when I think back as a kid, Rock and Sock Connection. They were a tag team for like a cup of coffee, but they did some really cool stuff. When done right, and like Kelly said, with the commitment, they can be really cool. I think Sol Ruca and Zarya, it certainly works. I mean, you've got, you think about like, I don't know. I always think about the NXT locker room as like a high school. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know, but I do. So you've got two girls that seem like they're in completely different cliques, but they're not, and they're friends, and it works, and I really like it. I think they complement each other really well, especially in their in ring styles. Zarya is much more aggressive and brute-ish, I guess, is the best word I'm coming up with right now. And obviously Sol Ruca much more. Hate to say she's much more athletic. I don't mean Zarya is not super athletic, but you guys know what I mean. Sol Ruca and all of the flips and bringing the gymnastics and the surfing experience to the table. I think they really complement each other. The match itself, it was good, and like Kelly said, the Meta Girls, obviously kind of toying up with the main roster right now. I don't think them taking a loss here is really a bad thing or out of the I think this is the way to go. Obviously, the Meta Girls, they're like I just said, they're already flirting with the main roster. They don't really need the win down in NXT. They've already got more eyeballs on them up there. Um, but Zarya and Solruka, they could use that little main roster rub. I guess kind of staring at the lights on your way out type of a deal for the Meta Girls there. So I think that that kind of works for me. Um, there was one point in this match I thought was absolutely hilarious, and I don't think it was intended to be hilarious, but it was kind of funny. Vic Joseph on commentary as Lash Legend and Zarya are standing face to face in the middle of the ring, just kind of like one on one for a minute. Vic is like, "Oh, the showdown we've been waiting for," and I don't know. I was ready for them to start like a showdown that we've been waiting for, and instead they just both big booted each other in the face, and that was it. And then Vic just started going on to promote Elimination Chamber, and it was nothing. It was just a hilarious sequence that happened there. Wanted to point it out. Other than that, um, yeah, like what they're doing.
This comment also almost got buried, but Brock Benningfield says Zarya's entrance screams monster, but they just made her one of the girls. What gives? Believe me, I have been searching my own soul about this. She seems like everything they did before she actually was on the show was to show how much of a monster she is. Everything that they put into it was that. So, like all these vignettes
There
and
is
everything like that, and the way they shot her and all that, they just, everything was pointing that way. Now, I won't argue with this odd couple pairing because there's a reason Team Hell No was so over. But why are you doing that already when you can just make her a monster? I know you can reset and pretend it never happened when you go to the main roster. I know that's an option. So whatever. But if I'm Zarya, I'd have to be a little bit more protective and say, hey, Saul's awesome. You paired me with a wrestler who is really good. And I understand the things we bring to the table. But right now, I'm Jim Neidhart, and I'm looking to be a little bit more than Jim Neidhart. And no disrespect, I love Jim Neidhart, but he went as high as he did. You know what I mean? So I guess that's what I would think if I was Zarya myself. Zarya may or may not have ever seen Jim Neidhart wrestle. I am much older than Zarya, so I don't know. Yeah, I Goodfellas says Zarya is definitely going to turn on Saul, and if played right, it will be awesome. Yeah, that is likely. I thought that Zarya was somebody who could have come in heel if she hadn't been so cool. And if she didn't do it right away, I thought she might do it on her second or third night. Now that didn't happen either, but I still think it could happen. So, any more big picture thoughts on Zarya, Nate? Otherwise, I'll move through.
No, not really. I think there's definitely a disconnect between, the whole monster buildup and kind of her being one of the girls. I'd like maybe for them to lean into one or the other. I would prefer the monster kind of thing, but yeah, there definitely seems to be a bit of a disconnect. Not enough for me to like hate the character or hate what they're doing with her, but yeah, you'd think that she might be a little bit darker, more sinister, or something. But instead, she's kind of, I guess, like you said, already doing the Team Hell No thing, and it seems a little forced or awkward in that sense, anyway.
We're talking about monsters, so might as well bring up Moose. He did open the show. We've got Moose and Obafemi. We talked about the possibility of this match. It was
Many
either
moons
you
ago, yes,
or I or one of the guys in the chat. Somebody brought up that Moose and Obafemi was a natural
It
A
was
natural.
definitely somebody in the chat.
Okay. Just said that it was a natural pairing. Moose is good enough in all aspects that you could almost wonder why he had never been used on a bigger scale than this. But he's done his share of New Japan spots. Seen him in some of those in some of the shows they do in LA and things like that. And of course, I've seen some of the stuff he's done in TNA. And yeah, he's a genuine monster. He's not Obafemi, but it would be very interesting. So those guys are on a crash course. But even before that, we now know that Lexus King is going to face Moose, because when you're a heel and you're finally being pushed for the first time, might as well take a high profile loss to a guy that's not on the roster, which is what he's about to do. He is not going to beat Moose for that TNA X Division Championship. It's just not something that's going to happen. Somebody will be the first team to win a championship while they are under contract with the other company,
But it ain't going to
but
be Lexus King.
it's not going to be Lexus King. I
At least,
do not
God,
think
I
it
hope
is.
not.
Unless they want to hang their hat on having him say, hey, I was the first one, because then you can just do that. Like Miz beat John Cena, and he's been talking about it for 15 years, and they still joke about the fact that he's still talking about it. So maybe, but I don't think so. I think that it will be a very satisfying beatdown where Moose just takes Lexus King to the woodshed. So there you go.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you 100%. I'm not nearly as familiar with Moose. I've seen, I think, 2, maybe 3 Moose matches in the course of my life. But from what I saw, and I've seen clips online and Reddit and whatnot. But from what I've seen, what I know, this should be one hell of a clash once we actually get there. Between Obafemi and Moose, not Lexus King and Moose. I still think that's going to be a good match, but I'm looking forward to the Obafemi Moose clash. It's interesting in a way, and obviously this makes a whole lot of sense between for it to be Moose and Obafemi, but in a way it is interesting that it's not like the TNA champion and the NXT champion. It's Joe Hendry. That's a much different match, much different vibe. Moose is a much more natural fit, but I don't know. I wanted to at least point it out because it came into my head. But it's still obviously. I don't think it's going to be title for title, but I think it's going to be an interesting champion versus champion match, and we'll see who comes out on top. I still think it's probably going to be Obafemi, but I don't know. We'll see. They may wind up putting Moose over in some way. I don't. Maybe, albeit probably not a clean finish. Yeah, I think that's all I get to say about that.
A couple of the guys in the chat talking about the fact that they've seen Moose either once or twice or never, and I will just say that Moose is fine-ish on the mic. As a wrestler in a main event context, he really can deliver. He really can. So
I got one for you.
What's that?
Who would win in a match, Moose or Horseshoe?
Oh, well, Moose, because he was pushed, and Horseshoe was
Fair.
not. So,
I mean, that would be my answer, and I figured it was going to be yours, but had to ask.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. But who would win in really bizarre interviews? That's going to be Horseshoe.
That's going to be Horseshoe.
He's got that market cornered, friend. Let's talk about something we should have talked about way earlier in this. Ricky Saints is NXT, and he's got issues. Go ahead.
We've gone an hour almost exactly without talking about Ricky Saints.
So the way I do this is that my matches are at the beginning of a line, but everything else is indented. And normally the matches lead into the most important things. I try to put a star on non-match things where they need them, and I forgot with Ricky Saints. So we're talking about him an hour in. Ricky Saints, the former Ricky Starks. One of the announcers is going to screw this up. Who's going to screw it up first? Vic. But somebody is going to screw this up first, and there's no way of telling who. Vic. Ethan Page and Wes Lee both have issues with him. Wes Lee, you can't even blame him because he was being interviewed by Sarah Schreiber, and the second Sarah Schreiber saw a shiny new toy, she walked away from Wes Lee to get a word with him. So I don't know, kind of doesn't put Wes Lee in a heel context there because that was super disrespectful. They're starting him in a tag match. He and Javon Evans against Ethan Page and Wes Lee. They kind of, they hinted as much as they could about Page and Starks both coming from AEW, as much as they could without saying that it happened. They talked about their history. So yeah, it's a great name. For me, Ricky Saints is a great name. It's just going to be very hard to get it right. I just said Starks, and I don't know if it was right to say Starks because that's the name it's been, or if it's wrong because that's not his name anymore.
I think
try
right
to
now
get
when we're
used to
talking about the transition, it's fine either way.
Yeah. You rip the Band-Aid off and you go 100% different with your name. It's really easy to remember.
I can't rip the Band-Aid off. I'm still bleeding.
If you go 75% of the way with your old name, oh boy, it's going to be tough. Especially Jim Ross would get this so the hell wrong over and over. But Saints, in a couple of different scenes, just recognizing how violent it is in NXT, just walking in with all the tag teamers laid out, and he's like, damn, this place is crazy.
And I love how Corey Graves chimed in there and was like, he better stay out of the parking lot.
Oh yeah. But yes, his scene where he signed his contract, I thought was a ton of fun because he tries to sign it. We're all waiting to find out what his name is because they've been teasing that by never saying his name, and they know we know. But they're not saying outright that they're not saying his name. And Ethan Page just stops him, so we can't find out what his name is. Was it Ethan Page first? Yes, and then Wes Lee stops him, so we can't find out his name. Finally, he writes down his name, and I'm like, God, we still can't see it. And they pan in, and that's when it says Ricky Saints. And I was like, okay, so they tweaked it, but they, fans can still chant Ricky. And they can still do Ricky Saints to the tune of Ricky Starks. But they got their name in, and somebody in there, Goodfella, said he's from New Orleans. I like it. Yeah, I didn't realize he was from there, but that makes perfect sense because they use those local color nicknames all the time. So thanks for pointing that out, Goodfella. There you go. CJ LaChapelle said Pro Wrestling Torch, at Pro Wrestling Torch, Lillian Garcia botched Roxanne's name last night during Raw. I wish I could say I was surprised by that, but she called the acolytes the accolades about 20 or 30 different times. Lillian is...
There's
know what?
Video.
People like Lillian, so I'm not going to say anything, but oh my God, she's not good. Okay, I did say something.
There's a video that was circulating around the internet, and I can't remember who it was. This was on SmackDown back when the rings, it was like they had the rings set, so it was like 99, 2000, something like that, before the fist. And somebody's walking to the ring, and I don't remember who it was, but she just announces them as Steve.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll power through that. We've got two other matches. The quickies. Channing Stacks Lorenzo versus Sean Spears. 503. Sean Spears wins a match. What do you know? Two in a row. That's probably the
Kane.
First time ever.
She called Kane Steve.
No.
I Googled it. Yep.
The worst ever at names was Mike Adamle. They hired him. He had
Jeff Harvey.
Yeah, he had like a 30-second clip. All he had to do was that, and he said Jeff Harvey. You know who else sucks? Michael Buffer. They paid him so much money to say Brett the Hitman Clark. Someone punched that guy in the nutsack. Channing Stacks Lorenzo eats a
You
pin
could
to Sean
probably have
Spears.
Channing Stacks Lorenzo punch him in the nutsack. You could probably hire
I
him to
would
do that.
definitely do that. I would definitely hire him to do that. Because this man, he'll take money and do seedy things. There you go. Spears 503 over Stacks. Eddie Thorpe 423 over Andre Chase. This match was kind of about Eddie. He, it's a win. That's good. But it was more about Andre Chase losing and the guys that are hanging out with him, whose names I definitely remember. Cale Dixon and Uriah Connors trying to hype him up to do Chase U again. And then Trick showed up on the screen and says, "It ain't over till I say it's over," which it's a good badass thing to say, I guess. But when somebody just lost, it sounds like it ain't over because I lost. And I hate that. I hate that for Trick. I don't like that that's what they had him say. I almost wish they had just moved him away from Eddie completely and had him do something different. So I don't know. So those are your last two matches. I'm going to head away from the computer for just a minute. I think I'll be back. Go ahead with the last two matches.
Okay, I'll be here. So Channing Stacks Lorenzo, Sean Spears. Not a whole lot to say about that. Sean Spears, I kind of like the gimmick that he's doing right now, this kind of like culty leader type of a thing, with Brooks Jensen and that other guy that I can't remember his name right now. It'll come to me probably about 3 o'clock in the morning, when I'm trying to sleep. But yeah, so I think he needed the win right now. Channing Stacks, he's like, I don't know, the whole underboss thing, and he's trying to prove himself to Tony D. They could turn this into a story like, you can't even win a match against, Sean Spears or whatever, and you want to question the Dawn. And they could kind of turn that into something between Stacks and Tony D. Um, but I think, right here, this is probably good for Sean to get a win, because him and his faction just kind of seem to be losing more so than getting a win. Andre Chase versus Eddie Thorpe. Man, I didn't expect in my wildest dreams to see Eddie Thorpe Andre Chase rather, come out victorious and come out on top in this match. But man, it was really cool to see him come back, and it was nice to hear that the Chase University music again. Like it. I don't know. I missed it. I missed Andre Chase. He was a staple of NXT TV for a long time. It's good to see him back, and potentially this revival of Chase University. It's it's cool. I'm trying to now kind of just stall for time to see if Kelly comes back. I don't have much more to say about any of that. So rather than me just babbling on and on like an idiot, I'm just going to say that's going to bring us to the end of our show. I'm Nate Lindberg. You can check the things I do out at natelindberg.com. That's Kelly Wells, other Kelly Wells on Blue Sky, and you can check him out there. And we'll be back next week to talk about NXT and, maybe some TNA happenings, because that's a thing we got to pay attention now to, as well as what's going on in TNA. Have a good night, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Take care.